The golden Texas sun blazed down on the lush green fields surrounding the sprawling Carter estate, nestled on over 20 acres just outside Dallas. Gleaming black Cadillac Escalades lined the granite-paved driveway like a row of massive obsidian gems, reflecting the afternoon light. The smoky aroma of grilled brisket mixed with the sweet tang of bourbon in the air, while a live country band played softly in the background. Out on the vast lawn, the Carter family's summer BBQ was in full swing, draped in the kind of opulence they were famous for. The men wore neatly pressed plaid shirts buttoned up to the collar, white cowboy hats gleaming under the sun. The women floated around in their designer floral dresses, gently swirling mimosas as they chatted about stock portfolios and real estate investments. I stood quietly by the buffet table, plate of untouched ribs in my hand. Jason Carter, 27. The other son, the forgotten one, Upton. From across the lawn, I saw my mother, Veronica, proudly linking arms with my older brother, Daniel. He was tall, broad-shouldered, ridiculously handsome, wrapped in a tailored navy suit that hugged his athletic frame. His perfectly styled hair gleamed like polished glass. Around them, wealthy business associates congratulated him with loud, booming voices. "Daniel, you're the rising star of Texas oil. Man, Carter Group's skyrocketing under your leadership." I felt my ears burn as Daniel casually glanced my way, lifted his bourbon glass, and flashed that smug half-smile before turning back to his entourage. And my little brother Jason here. He's still, exploring his passion for art. Everyone needs a hobby, right? The group burst into laughter, sharp and stabbing like hundreds of tiny needles piercing my chest. I forced a brittle smile and looked away, avoiding the occasional pitying glances from the other guests. Every family gathering was the same tired play on repeat. Ever since my grandfather? Warren Carter, founder of Carter Oil, passed away suddenly 5 years ago. Daniel had been anointed the family's shining heir. The multi-billion-dollar oil empire fell neatly into his lap like it was always meant to be, but I never believed it was that simple. I remembered those long evenings sitting beside my grandfather in the walnut-paneled library of the estate, the soft amber glow casting shadows on his lined face, his eyes still razor-sharp even in his final years. "Jason," he'd say, "real power isn't measured by how many oil fields you own, but by how you treat people when you hold that power." He understood me, the odd one, in a family where money and influence were the only currencies that mattered. He would take me to the charity homes funded by Carter Foundation, where orphaned kids clung to him, their scholarships quietly secured without public fanfare. And yet, after his death, everything shifted in ways I couldn't understand. The will that Attorney Peterson read to the entire family handed complete control to Daniel. It felt like a slap across my face. My mother merely patted my shoulder with a cold glint in her eye. "We have to respect your grandfather's wishes, Jason." Respect, or had they manipulated those so-called wishes? 3 days after the BBQ, while helping the housekeeper clear out the old attic to repair a leaky roof, my entire world flipped. I shoved aside a stack of moldy cardboard boxes and discovered a small, rusted safe hidden behind a dusty velvet curtain. The lock was broken. With a gentle pry, the door creaked open, revealing a thick envelope sealed in red wax, stamped with the embossed crest of Hamilton and Rowe, my grandfather's old legal firm. My heart pounded as I read the shaky handwriting scrawled across the front, "Official Will Warren Carter Confidential," hands trembling. I pulled out the thick parchment, original signatures, notary seals, and a handwritten note from my grandfather himself. "The assets of Carter Oil, all shares and executive authority, shall transfer solely to my grandson Jason Carter, the only one who upholds the humanitarian ideals this company was built upon." I stood frozen in that dim attic for God knows how long, the words pounding in my head. So all these years of humiliation, of trying to earn their approval, it was all a deliberate lie. My parents, Daniel, they all knew. And buried this. Fury surged in my chest, but I clenched my fists. No. I couldn't let emotion ruin this. This was my only leverage, and I needed to play it smart. A few days later, I sat anxiously in an upscale coffee shop in uptown Dallas, glancing at my watch. Then she walked in, Emily, my girlfriend, my only true ally, a sharp, ruthless estate attorney who specialized in contested wills. Her eyes were as piercing as ever. "Jason, you said you had something huge." I slid the will across the table. She studied it carefully, her expression briefly frozen before a slow, knowing smirk crept across her lips. "Well then," she whispered, leaning back with a cold gleam in her eye I had never seen before. "The game is officially on." She glanced up, her voice steady, resolute. "If you have the guts for this, I'll help you burn their whole rotten hive to the ground." And in that moment, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. Since that conversation with Emily, I had stepped into a world I barely recognized, a world of legal loopholes, shadowy deals, cutthroat maneuvering, and the brutal ruthlessness of Texas elite power games. Only now did I begin to grasp why my family had gone to such lengths to bury that will. Carter Group wasn't just the largest oil conglomerate in the South. Under Daniel's leadership, its tentacles had spread into real estate, banking, tech, even politics. A sprawling empire valued at over $12 billion. As Emily dug deeper into the legal files, the picture grew clearer. "Jason," she said, her voice cold and steady. "They fabricated the entire inheritance trail, not just the will, but all the power of attorney documents submitted to the Texas probate court. The signatures were photoshopped, the timestamps backdated, extremely professional work." I let out a bitter chuckle. My parents abandoned morality a long time ago. Power is the only law they serve. Emily narrowed her eyes. "Wrong. There's one law they can't manipulate: federal law. If we take this into federal court, I swear they won't recover from it." The deeper we dug, the more dangerous it became. My father, Richard Carter, was far more than a ruthless businessman. He bankrolled political campaigns, rubbed shoulders with Texas senators, and funneled millions into dark money super PACs that fortified his near-invincible network of influence. My mother, Veronica, while not directly running the company, was the mastermind behind the family's offshore maze. She controlled our family's trust through shell companies in the Bahamas, hiding hundreds of millions from taxes. And the most painful discovery, Daniel was no mere puppet. Emily uncovered internal emails proving he personally ordered the deletion of all original copies of my grandfather's will at Hamilton and Rowe, just weeks after his death. He knew everything from the very beginning. 3 months after finding the true will, our plan began to take shape. Emily hired private investigators to track down every former employee of my grandfather's legal firm, anyone who might have witnessed the signing of that document. Some were retired. One was living off the grid in Montana. But we got lucky. Margaret, a former secretary, still remembered everything vividly. "Yes, I saw Mr. Warren sign that will myself," she confirmed. "He even said at last, Jason will have the chance to prove he's worthy." We recorded every word of her testimony. At the same time, Emily brought in forensic handwriting experts to analyze the signatures. Under ultraviolet light, the truth was undeniable. The will that had been presented in probate court years ago was a flawless counterfeit. But I knew one thing: evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed a stage, a perfect, public arena to expose my family's lies for everyone to see. And then the opportunity arrived right on cue. Daniel's wedding invitation landed on my doorstep. The wedding would be held at the Crescent Hotel, the grand flagship property Carter Group had recently acquired in downtown Dallas. The guest list included every major political figure, media mogul, and power broker in Texas. I flipped the velvet invitation in my hand, eyes locked on the embossed lettering, Daniel Carter and Olivia Spencer, the grand wedding of the year. Emily sipped her red wine, her voice lowering into a tone of calculated precision. This is your stage. Jason, if you want to take them down, let them implode under their own spotlight. My pulse quickened as a dangerous resolve hardened inside me. If this is the play they scripted, then I'll make sure its final act becomes their worst nightmare. That night, back in my downtown penthouse, I sat alone under the soft glow of the lamp, rereading the old letter my grandfather had written for my 18th birthday. Never fear being different, Jason. Only those who dare stand alone truly see human nature for what it is. One day, you'll understand why I placed it all in your hands. I clutched the letter, a fire igniting within me like never before. This power game, I would end it, right inside the very temple of deception they had built. The wedding was scheduled for early April, right in the heart of Dallas springtime. News of the wedding of the century spread through Texas high society like wildfire. Headlines plastered across every outlet. Daniel Carter, young CEO of Carter Group, set to marry Olivia Spencer, heiress of the Spencer Financial Group. The union of two billionaire dynasties, Carter Oil and Spencer Financial, was sealing an unbreakable alliance, tightening the web of power blanketing the South. I read the breathless articles with a smirk. The grander the spectacle, the harder the fall. For 2 relentless months, Emily and I operated like a covert military campaign. She even pulled in a trusted legal strike team from her New York firm, federal-level experts in complex inheritance fraud. Jason, we have everything we need now, she said one evening. Then her voice shifted, cautious. But there's a new problem. My brow furrowed. What is it? She slid a heavy financial dossier across the table. A hidden trust fund, $300 million. It's registered under your mother's name, Veronica. It's been quietly funneling money into shady projects in Venezuela, the Middle East, and laundering it through venture capital firms. Jason, so if we expose this, it's no longer just an inheritance case. We're looking at an international money laundering scandal. My jaw clenched. This was the submerged part of the iceberg. This wasn't just about stealing my inheritance. My entire family had been neck-deep in criminal operations for years. Days later, an anonymous message hit my phone. Just one line, know when to stop. Jason, this game isn't for you. Then came the late-night calls from blocked numbers. Texts with no sender. Someone had tried to force open my apartment window while I was away. Emily noticed shadows following her after work. A chill spread through my spine. They're starting to strike back, Emily scoffed when I told her. They're like sharks biting into a hook. These dirty tactics only add to our evidence when we blow this wide open in federal court. But I knew this much. I was now deep inside a battlefield with no exit. Either I destroy them, or I get buried alongside their filth. The night before the wedding rehearsal, Daniel reached out unexpectedly. Let's meet privately, Jason, before this goes too far. We arranged to meet at the family's private golf course, the very one where my grandfather taught me my first putt at 10 years old. The vast green stretched around us. No bodyguards, no witnesses, just silence, heavy, dangerous. Daniel sipped his whiskey, gazing into the distance. Jason, I know exactly what you're doing. Really, I always figured you were too dumb to grasp it, I replied coldly. He let out a thin, humorless chuckle. His voice lowered. You don't understand. Jason, if this blows up, it won't just take me down. It will obliterate the entire Carter family, including you. I laughed bitterly, eyes razor-sharp. Daniel, you got it backwards. You and our parents betrayed this family the moment you destroyed Grandpa's real will. He set his glass down and stepped closer. Face inches from mine, voice rough and low. Are you sure you're truly one of us? Jason Hart of the Carter bloodline. I froze. His piercing gaze held mine, that smug, venomous smile curling at his lips. Dig just a little deeper, and you'll uncover a truth far more painful. Don't let it come to that. As he walked away, I stood, rooted on the empty green, cold wind, whistling past my ears. What the hell was he hinting at? Am I even a Carter? Fuzzy fragments from my past suddenly resurfaced: my mother dodging questions about my birth, my grandfather staring at me with a strange mix of affection and restraint. Another secret, something buried even deeper. Ever since that meeting with Daniel, sleep had become a stranger to me. Are you sure you're truly part of the Carter family? His words stabbed into my brain like a sharpened needle, twisting every night. I dug through old photos, medical records, birth certificates. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. Not a single sign of tampering, but that very perfection only fueled my suspicion. Then I remembered my 16th birthday. My grandfather had leaned in and whispered to me after everyone had left, "Bloodlines don't always matter. Jason, sometimes it's the choice of the heart that creates true family." I had laughed it off back then, but now that memory cut through my chest like a blade. After days of combing through hospital archives, Emily finally found a crack. She slid a brittle old file across the table. Records from Baptist Hospital, Dallas. On the first page was my mother's name, Veronica Carter, and my birth date. But at the bottom corner, a separate patient code stood out. Emily tapped it. "Your mother was admitted for premature labor at 28 weeks, yet you were born at a full, healthy 7 pounds. Odd, isn't it?" A chill ran through me. "You're saying I wasn't the baby born that day?" Emily nodded slowly. "I believe you were adopted into the family quietly, likely arranged by your family, with the hospital's cooperation." The world tilted beneath my feet. They hadn't just stolen my inheritance. I might have never truly belonged to this family at all. For days, I hunted for anyone who might know the truth. Eventually, I found Helen, a retired nurse who had worked at the hospital that year. We met at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of Fort Worth. She stared at me for a long moment, as if seeing a ghost. You look so much like your birth mother." I stiffened. "My birth mother isn't Veronica Carter." Helen exhaled heavily. "There was a young girl back then, a sophomore art student. She got pregnant out of wedlock. Her parents wouldn't accept it and forced her into the hospital in secret. After delivery, the baby was immediately placed with a powerful family through arrangements made by Mr. Peterson, the current Carter Group attorney. The adoptive family was kept completely anonymous. But you carry her features." My grip tightened on the chair, eyes burning. So from the very beginning, I was a pawn, placed into the Carter family under the guise of charity. But what Emily uncovered next hit even harder. "Jason," she said softly, flipping through the Carter financial records. "Your grandfather knew everything from the start. How could he?" "Because Warren Carter personally paid the hospital fees for your birth mother through his private charity fund. The original accounting entries still exist." My heart fractured. What did that mean? I wasn't his biological grandson. Yet my grandfather deliberately brought me into this family, out of compassion, to atone for his son's mistakes, or because he saw me as the rightful heir to lead Carter Group. One day, Emily's voice softened, reading the storm of emotions flooding through me. "He chose you, Jason. Bloodline be damned. That's why the real will still names you." The night before the wedding, I stood on the balcony of the Crescent Hotel, gazing out over Dallas's glowing skyline. My grandfather's voice echoed in my mind. "True power isn't about where you're born, Jason. It's about where you choose to stand. Tomorrow, I would stand. I had nothing left to lose." The wedding day, the Crescent Hotel, gleamed like a European palace in the heart of Texas. Over 300 guests gathered inside its massive crystal ballroom, nearly 30,000 square feet, adorned with glittering baccarat chandeliers, black and white marble floors, and towering arrangements of pristine white orchids on every table. Outside, A parade of black limousines lined the red carpet entrance. Paparazzi crowded the entrance, their lenses capturing every dazzling gown and immaculate tuxedo worn by Dallas's elite politicians, financiers, and power brokers. This was their dream stage, and it would also be where I buried them. I walked in wearing a jet-black tuxedo, crisp bow tie, and a stare cold enough to freeze the room. Emily glided beside me in a blood-red satin gown, radiating lethal elegance. Heads turned instantly. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Jason Carter, I thought he never attended these high society functions. He looks different tonight. Different indeed. I was no longer Daniel's shadow. The ceremony began. On stage, Daniel stood like a Hollywood prince in his white tuxedo. Beside him, Olivia Spencer, the gem of Southern finance, beamed flawlessly under the barrage of camera flashes. My parents, Richard and Veronica, sat proudly in the front row, basking in the climax of their meticulously engineered power fantasy. Amid the glittering lights and flowing champagne, only minutes remained before it all came crashing down. After my father's hollow speech about the Carter family legacy, the MC invited Daniel to address the audience. Daniel gripped the microphone, his trademark confident grin in place. Today isn't just the most important day of my life with Olivia. It's also a testament to Carter Group's strength, an enduring symbol of trust, business ethics, and family tradition. Business ethics, family tradition. I nearly laughed. As applause echoed, I rose, heads snapped toward me. Emily glanced at me, our silent signal. I strode to the stage, plucked the mic from Daniel's hand, and offered a chilling smile. Pardon me, everyone. Allow me to add a few words. The ballroom fell silent. Guests held their breath. The reporters instinctively activated their cameras. I faced the sea of stunned faces, my voice slicing through the silence. Tonight, you're not simply witnessing a wedding. You're witnessing the most elaborate fraud in the history of the Carter family. My mother went pale. Daniel stiffened. Nearly a decade ago, after my grandfather Warren Carter passed away, a forged will was presented to strip me of my rightful inheritance. I held up the thick folder in my hand. This is the original will with certified signatures, notarization, and legal witnesses. Full ownership of Carter Group belongs to me. I have forensic experts, witnesses, and financial records to prove this calculated fraud. Gasps spread across the ballroom. Several senators exchanged tense glances. Reporters surged closer, lenses trained on my mother as sweat glistened on her forehead. But I wasn't finished. And that's not the whole truth. Ladies and gentlemen, I took a breath, my gaze sweeping across the room. The Carter family has operated an international money laundering operation through offshore accounts, funneling dark money into political organizations and Middle Eastern oil conglomerates. A direct strike at the politicians seated front row. Several immediately dropped their gazes, texting furiously. Daniel lunged toward me, but Emily was faster. She raised a small USB drive for the cameras to capture. All evidence has been secured and submitted to the FBI and the Department of Justice this morning. Every individual implicated should contact legal counsel immediately. The atmosphere shattered like glass. Suddenly, my mother stood, her voice breaking into a desperate scream. "Jason, you don't know the truth. You're not my son." The ballroom erupted. Shouts, gasps, the chaotic whirl of camera flashes filled the air. I froze for a beat, then slowly turned to face her. "You're right, Mother. I'm not your blood, but grandfather, the only one in this family with a conscience, chose me to inherit this empire you all desecrated." Olivia stood, paralyzed, her face drained of color as she clutched Daniel's trembling arm. Guests began abandoning tables, distancing themselves as if from a contagious plague. And then, the legal advisor's phones buzzed in unison. The dream wedding had officially become a public execution. I gently set the microphone on the table, straightened my tuxedo collar, and offered a calm smile to the shocked crowd. "Now then, let the real party begin. 3 hours after detonating the wedding, the Carter Group nightmare erupted nationwide. Every major network, CNN, CNBC, Fox ran urgent breaking news. Carter Group embroiled in inheritance fraud, international money laundering, and federal political manipulation. The hashtag #ChiCarter scandal topped Twitter within 2 hours. Headlines were merciless. Empire of greed. The Carter dynasty collapses. Federal agents, FBI, IRS, and the Department of Justice stormed Carter Group headquarters in the middle of the night, seizing servers, financial records, and confidential files. Forensic financial teams were flown in from D.C. like a full-blown military operation. And I stood in the shadows, cold and composed, like a hunter watching his first lethal shot land. But I knew the war wasn't over, because while the federal investigation had begun, my family, especially my mother, still had cards left to play. They wouldn't fall without a fight. Emily sat beside me in the hotel penthouse, eyes glued to the non-stop news coverage. "Jason, this is the most dangerous phase," she warned. "Cornered animals bite the hardest." I nodded, my voice low. "They know I'm preparing the final strike." Emily opened a desk drawer, sliding a thick envelope toward me. "The final DNA confirmation." I silently opened it. Inside was the paternity test Emily had covertly obtained from Baptist Hospital's medical archives, cross-referencing my DNA with Richard, Veronica, and one other name, Lillian Monroe, my biological mother. Result: full biological match with Lillian. 0 genetic connection to Richard or Veronica Carter. I closed my eyes. No surprise. I'd sensed it ever since Helen first spoke. But Emily continued, her voice like a surgeon's scalpel. "Jason, Warren Carter likely knew everything from the beginning. Lillian Monroe wasn't some stranger. She was his secret mistress for years before he married Veronica." My blood froze. "You mean I'm not Richard's son, but I could be Warren's biological son?" Emily nodded, lowering her voice. "If that theory holds, then legally and morally, your claim to the Carter legacy is stronger than Daniel's. You carry the founder's blood." The revelation rocked me to my core. Years of humiliation, years of being called a parasite, a misfit, a weak artist. They forgot one thing: I was the only one who truly bore the blood of the man who built the Carter empire. The following morning, the FBI summoned Richard Carter for emergency questioning. He emerged from their headquarters surrounded by a swarm of reporters. His pale face was drenched in sweat, his pristine suit crumpled and disheveled. The press shouted relentlessly, "Mr. Carter, did you authorize offshore laundering? Were you aware of Warren's original will? Will you resign or face charges?" No one shielded him anymore. The mask of power was cracking apart. Meanwhile, my mother, Veronica, sat alone inside the mansion, a near-empty glass of red wine beside her. She was no longer the fearsome queen I once cowered from. Her eyes were sunken, her platinum hair disheveled, lipstick smeared. When I arrived, she didn't even look up. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You destroyed everything, Jason." I stepped closer, staring into the woman who had crushed my childhood with condescending eyes. "No, Mother, you killed it the moment you buried the truth." Veronica finally lifted her head, her voice shaking. "We had to. Richard forced me. Daniel was too fragile as a child. I feared everything would collapse if we handed power to you. I never hated you, Jason. I was terrified you weren't ruthless enough to survive this world." I clenched my jaw. It hurt, but my anger had burned out long ago. All that remained was cold clarity. "Wrong, Mother. The ruthlessness you worship is what destroyed this family." The next day, Daniel was finally dragged into FBI custody. He roared into the cameras like a cornered animal. "I did nothing wrong. Jason stole my place. I was betrayed, just like you." But the public no longer bought the victim act. The media devoured his pleas, tearing them into sensational headlines. Daniel Carter, the fallen oil prince. The Carter Empire had officially collapsed, and I stood amidst its ashes, cold, steady, and the one who lit the match. 3 months later, the United States Federal Court in Dallas overflowed with national media, each outlet glued to the minute-by-minute coverage of this historic trial. Outside, crowds waved protest banners, treating the proceedings like a political mafia takedown. On the defendant's stand sat Richard Carter, once the kingpin of Southern power, head lowered, hands cuffed. His expensive designer suit now hung loose on his frail, broken frame. Beside him, Texas' most expensive criminal attorneys sat powerless. The verdict echoed through the packed courtroom. Defendant Richard Carter is hereby sentenced to 30 years in federal prison for international money laundering, tax fraud, organized inheritance fraud, and political corruption. Camera shutters fired like machine guns. My mother, Veronica Carter, was sentenced to 20 years for her role in forging the will, operating offshore laundering networks, and illegally manipulating medical records to cover up my adoption. She bowed her head quietly, no tears, no screams. Whatever pride she once had long since rotted away. Daniel Carter, the man caught between criminal and victim, agreed to testify for the FBI and had his sentence reduced to 12 years, but his wealth, reputation, and status were completely stripped. In his first interview, post-sentencing, Daniel sat in an orange prison jumpsuit, his eyes hollow. "I used to think I would be king." "What do you think now?" the reporter asked. "I was just a clown in my parents' show." As for me, the court formally recognized my rightful claim as the sole heir to Carter Group through the validated original will. But I knew better that empire was a rotting corpse, tainted by global scandals. Emily looked at me that night as the transfer paperwork finalized. "You can keep it, rebuild it, rebrand it if you want." I quietly shook my head. I don't need a kingdom built on blood and lies. The very next morning, I sold every share of Carter Group to neutral non-profit trusts, dismantling the entire corrupted dynasty. The billions generated from the liquidation were funneled into a new scholarship fund named after the man who saved my life, the Warren Foundation, providing orphan children the opportunities I was once denied. And then there was my biological mother, Lillian Monroe. After 27 years apart, we finally met, face to face, at a small cafe in Austin. The frail woman with early graying hair reached across the table, her hand trembling as she touched mine. "Jason, I never dared hope you'd forgive me." I gently squeezed her hand and smiled softly. "You owe me nothing, Mom. Because of you, I got a second chance, and so did he." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Warren never stopped thinking about you. It was the greatest regret of his life, his secret love, but you were the one good thing he left behind." 1 year later, at the first graduation ceremony for the scholarship program, I stood in the middle of the campus courtyard, surrounded by hundreds of children in cap and gown regalia. A tiny girl with sparkling dark eyes ran up and hugged me tightly. "Mr. Jason, thank you for giving me the chance to go to school." I gently patted her head, feeling peace for the first time in nearly 3 decades of living in shadows. I had lost a family, but gained a true legacy. Not a financial empire, but exactly what my grandfather always dreamed of: creating real value for those who deserve it. The power game was over, and this time, I was the one who wrote the final chapter.